You must love podcasts if you're listening to this. Do you want to start your own one or you already have one? Then follow Smarter Podcasting to get expert advice from me, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. Since 2019, we've worked with over 40 podcasters, produced over 700 episodes, and helped many podcasts get to the top of the Apple Podcast charts. And right now, I'm offering you a professional edit for just $27. Click the link in the show notes. Podcasting in its purest form is an audio-only medium. One of the most difficult things about podcasts or making podcasts for YouTube is they're generally not that dynamic. It's one person like me or two or a panel of people talking directly into a camera or to each other. You've got to find ways to make it engaging. The biggest differences between an algorithm like YouTube and the RSS feed on podcast is it's not time-based. The difference with YouTube is it can pick up an old video that you made maybe a year ago, and there's something in that video that the algorithm picks up and starts promoting it to people. Thanks for listening to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. Now, I am so sorry, I've not been posting regularly on this channel at all. I've been really bad about it, and I know one of the biggest tips that you can give to anyone when podcasting is consistency. I know I should be posting every week, every 2 weeks, or even every month on the same day, on the same time. And I'm one of those terrible people that I do coach people on podcasting, and it's kind of one of those do what I say, not what I do situations. And part of the reason for that is because it has been such a busy, crazy year with 7 Million Bikes Podcast, which is the company that produces this podcast. And we've worked with over 40 podcasts across the world as well. If you haven't seen the last episode, go back and check it out. I shared my talk at PodFest Asia, which I was so excited to do. That's been part of it as well. And it's just been really exciting to help so many people fulfill the podcasting goals. This is Smarter Podcasting. I'm Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. I started my first podcast back in 2019 just as a hobby, just for some fun. I'd always been a podcast addict since the early 2000s when I started listening to Ricky Gervais, which was the most downloaded podcast in the world. That was back when podcasts had to be downloaded onto an iPod, hence the name podcast, if you didn't know that already. So I've been addicted since the beginning. Then I listened to Serial back in 2014, just like the rest of the world, and continued on from there. So I started my own podcast as a hobby in 2019, and then around about 2021, after the pandemic, I lost my job, and I started 7 Million Bikes Podcast full-time to help podcasters around the world. So Smarter Podcasting is to help you become a better podcaster and make the best podcast possible. Now, in this episode, I want to talk about something that is controversial, can be controversial, and I'm actually a convert. And if you're watching this on YouTube right now, this is direct proof of how much of a convert I am. We're going to talk about today what's the difference between a podcaster and a YouTuber. Now, for the longest time, I would get in online debates, I would get angry with people. Not angry, because I'm not an angry person, but I would get worked up about it, that a podcast is audio only. Now, I did see somebody say one time in the comments that a podcast can be a PDF file. I never really looked into that. I'm not really sure how that is. I think there was a claim that you can add a PDF file to the RSS feed, and then from there that makes it a podcast. I'm not too sure about that. But the debate was podcast versus video. And I said, you can't call a video a podcast. Now, I do believe that a little bit still. If you only have a YouTube channel, there's a problem that a lot of people just call it a podcast. A podcast to me does need to have an audio element. It needs to be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the other platforms, and you can have video as well. That's absolutely fine. But if it's video only, personally, I wouldn't call it a podcast, but I've given in because so many people have. I still think that that is a YouTube channel. But in this episode, this is a question that a lot of people are searching for, a lot of people are looking for. So we're going to answer it. What is the difference between a podcast and a YouTuber? So let's get into it. So first up, let's talk about the podcaster. Podcasting in its purest form is an audio-only medium, and it has a unique charm. It's perfect for those people who love to delve into deep conversations, storytelling, interview people, or they just want to talk. As a podcaster, your primary tool is obviously your voice. You don't need a fancy camera, you don't need a visually appealing setup, and it can be a significant advantage for those who maybe feel camera shy and prefer to focus purely just on content rather than the visual presentation. This was me for the longest time. I didn't want to deal with a background, I didn't want to deal with a camera, I didn't want to deal with all of those different elements. I just wanted to talk into a microphone, and it is the easiest and the cheapest way to do it. So, what are the benefits of being a podcaster? Well, number one is the ease of production. So you can start a podcast with just a decent microphone like I have and a quiet room. I'm not even in a quiet room. Right now, there's banging going on above me because there's construction in the apartment above me. And don't get me started on that because I will get angry about that. But over the years, I've learned I do have a dynamic microphone, so it's only picking up my voice. It's only picking up the sound around here, so it hopefully shouldn't be picking up the sound above. And I'm going to turn on studio sound from the script afterwards, which should cut out all the background noise and the white noise behind. Now, it is easier to produce a podcast, but the biggest, most important thing about a podcast, the biggest difference between a podcaster and a YouTuber is listener engagement. Now, obviously, with a podcast, most people are going to be listening on the phone and they're going to listen with headphones. So it creates a more intimate connection with the listener as well. But the biggest thing is when somebody listens to a podcast, where are you listening to this podcast right now? Actually, ask yourself that. Where are you right now? You're probably in the gym, in the car, maybe doing the dishes, household chores. People listen to podcasts while they're doing something else, right? But it means they can listen intently. I would never listen to a podcast while I'm doing work. I couldn't focus on two things at one time. I want to focus on the podcast. So I generally listen at the gym. So I have an hour to listen to a podcast every day. Now, what that means is that on average, 60 to 80%, even more, are going to finish your podcast when they start it. I've looked at my engagement. It is between the 60 to 80% rate of people that will finish that episode. Now, on YouTube, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. It is completely different. On YouTube, if 50% of the people who start your episode get to 30 seconds, just 30 seconds, that is typical, and YouTube tells you this on the channel. So the engagement levels are massively, massively different. Now think about the way the YouTube platform is designed. There's on the right hand side, it's next video. You've already got things popping up on the screen saying, do you want to switch to the next video? Often people are flicking through, or they're going to find your video because they've searched for something on Google and your video comes up, and then it's going to jump directly to the piece of your video that the people want to find the information from. So that means that on average, the engagement on YouTube can be 20 to 40%. If you can get 40% engagement on YouTube, you are doing amazing. So you have to remember you're producing two very different pieces of content. One, people are going to listen to intently. The other, people are probably going to skip through, maybe only listen to the intro, get to the parts they like, and then move on to the next one. So it's very, very different. Now, another massive benefit of producing a podcast over YouTube is the ease and the time savings that it makes. To be honest, even if you're watching this video right now on YouTube, I thought before I recorded this, should I just record audio only? It's so much easier. I don't need to set up the green screen in the background. I don't need to set up the camera. I don't need to add both the files together. I don't need to edit it. It takes longer. I have to think about it more. I admit that one of the reasons that I love podcasting is that you can just plug in the microphone and talk, and it's easy. So those are three of the biggest reasons that I love podcasting, but it doesn't mean it doesn't come without its challenges, of course. One of the biggest ones, and I actually had a coaching call with someone about this just yesterday, is discoverability. It can be much harder to get your podcast discovered. Audio content isn't as easily found by the biggest search engine in the world, which is obviously Google. Now, even though podcasts are now automatically transcribed and the transcriptions are posted with Apple Podcasts and Spotify for the most part, at this moment in time, so 2024, June 2024, Google doesn't read your podcast. Google doesn't know the content of your podcast. So when we talk about discoverability, if you have a podcast, for example, about how to fix your taps in your kitchen, right? Somebody Googles, how do you fix the taps in my kitchen? Google hasn't read your podcast. It hasn't scanned it. It hasn't crawled it. It doesn't know what the content is about. And since Google has removed Google Podcasts, podcasts do not show up at all now in Google searches. So if you search something, it's never going to show you a podcast. It's going to show you websites and it's going to show you YouTube videos. So that's the biggest drawback. Because podcasts are on an RSS feed, on all those platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, it's just going to show you the latest episode. It's not based on the algorithm, which is good and bad at the same time. So biggest drawback of podcasts is they can be hard to discover just adding an audio file on its own to the platforms. Now, there are other tips to discoverability, which we can cover in other episodes and I've maybe talked about before, so go check those out or go to my blog. There's definitely loads of information on my blog in there, or reach out to me directly as well for a free consultation as well. Now, another massive drawback from doing an audio-only podcast is monetization. So obviously there's sponsorships, but you really need to have high downloads. You need to be in the top kind of 1 to 5% of downloads to get sponsorship as well. It's quite difficult to monetize a podcast. Obviously with YouTube, it is difficult as well, but there are easier avenues. There are automatic avenues. As soon as your channel hits a threshold and starts to meet that threshold, then you're automatically available for monetization. Now that's a whole different thing as well, but it definitely is a big challenge of podcasting is monetization, whereas YouTube has a much more direct path. And the third big drawback of audio-only podcasting is limited engagement. Now, if you have a podcast, there are some buttons now on Spotify and iHeartRadio, but again, it's all different. Even Buzzsprout now offers a send me a message function, but these are all different tools on different platforms that people have to use to contact you. The other way you want to create engagement, you could create a Discord channel, obviously a Facebook group, an Instagram page. These are all different, disparate ways of creating engagement with your Facebook channel. YouTube, obviously, is the biggest social media platform on the planet. So if you create a YouTube channel, and if you are watching this video on YouTube right now, go to the comments below while you're watching, leave me a comment, tell me what you think of this episode, just say hello, tell me where you're from. So right away, watching on YouTube, it's a one-stop shop. You can comment right down below, I can comment back, other people can leave remarks, and it can really create amazing engagement. So that is one of the biggest differences between being a podcaster only and a YouTuber. All right, now let's switch gears and talk about something that took me a long time to get into. But again, if you're watching this video, you can see that I have got into it. I'm not all the bells and whistles yet. I don't have the best camera. I don't have the best setup. I don't have the best lighting. But as Chris Mitzoff says from Podfest, start ugly. And if you go back to my very first episodes from audio only, from video only, I started very ugly. And it's still not that beautiful, but I'm getting there. So slowly, it will get better. But so talking about being a YouTuber only, it's obviously a visual platform and it's fantastic for creators who love to be in front of the camera. I wouldn't say I love to be in front of the camera, but I guess I don't dislike it, right? I recently posted a little short form reel on Facebook and somebody commented, this guy really likes the sound of his own voice. And I was like, well, yeah, of course I do. Otherwise I wouldn't do this. And you do have to get in love with it. Not just the sound of your voice, but the look of your face as well. So it is a visual medium as well. You have to be happy to be in front of the camera and engage with your viewers. And hopefully this video is a little bit dynamic. To be honest, one of the most difficult things about podcasts or making podcasts for YouTube is they're generally not that dynamic. It's one person like me or two or a panel of people talking directly into a camera or to each other. You've got to find ways to make it engaging, and I'm still working on that as well. So if you are watching on YouTube and you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments below. But of course, there are many upsides to YouTube as well. Now, the biggest one is the visual appeal. I made a little bit of an investment in a green screen just to give it a more visually appealing look. And mostly, you can't see all the mess that's behind there. It's a disgrace. So I put up a green screen. Now you can see this lovely background behind me. Now, I touched on it before about podcast. One of the biggest things about having a YouTube channel is discoverability and growth. YouTube's algorithm can help you get discovered more easily. I wanted to share with you about one of my favorite affiliate partners, and that is Fiverr. I've been using Fiverr for years for everything from ordering YouTube thumbnails to keyword research, writing podcast articles, even to Canva designs and thumbnails and more. So whether you're a budding entrepreneur, a podcaster, or anyone in between, Fiverr has got you covered. It really is the go-to platform if you want to find freelancers offering a massive range of services to help you on any project. Maybe you need a stunning new logo or just a short animation. Whatever you need, you can find it on Fiverr. What I love the most is how easy Fiverr makes it to connect with talented freelancers from around the world, all at prices that will fit whatever your budget is. Plus, with Fiverr's secure payment system, you can trust that your transactions are safe and secure. No dodgy people you meet on Facebook groups that disappear with your money and never give you what you want. What, that's only happened to me? As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you use the link and at no extra cost to you. As an affiliate partner, I will get a small commission if you click my link and you buy something, all at no extra cost to you. And best of all, you will be directly supporting the making of this podcast that you're listening to for free, but it is not free to make. So why wait? Head over to somewhere that you've probably never been before. It's called the show notes. So whatever app you're listening in, if it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything at all, head to the show notes, click on my special link, and then you can browse thousands of gigs ready to help you with your next project. So YouTube, which is different to podcasting, actually does crawl your video. It scans it. Think about when you go on YouTube and you can instantly create the captions at the bottom. Before you've even created a transcript, YouTube automatically transcribes your episode so that viewers can read the captions at the bottom. This means that Google knows what your video is about. And as I said, go back to my earlier definition. So think about when you search for something like, how do I fix my tap? And it's going to show you now a YouTube video, and it will show you the exact second where to click on to watch it, to tell you exactly which part of that video to watch. That blows my mind. That is absolutely incredible. So YouTube knows way more about your content, more than you probably do. So that means the algorithm is going to show it to people who want to see it. So for this podcast, I hope that when somebody goes into Google or goes onto YouTube and they go, how do I make a podcast? Hopefully my video is going to come up. Even if you do it on Google, hopefully my video may also show as well. Now, the algorithm obviously has its downsides as well. It can create a bit of an echo chamber as well, and you see the same channels come up again and again and again. But one of the biggest differences between an algorithm like YouTube and the RSS feed on podcast is it's not time-based. So when you post your podcast, and most of you will know this already, you're going to see the most amount of downloads in the first 24 hours. Then it's going to dip. You're still going to get downloads for 7 days, and then it's going to just trail off. I've been doing podcasts for years. I've seen the trends. It's what happens. You get a massive spike when you publish your episode. It goes down, and then it trails off. Now, it's not to say those episodes that I published in 2019, they are still getting downloads. And because I've published so many episodes, once now I've got like 100, 200 episodes, even if all those old episodes are only getting 5 downloads a day, that still adds up to 2,000 downloads a day. So you still want to be creating content regularly and consistently. But the difference with YouTube, and I've seen this, is it can pick up an old video that you made maybe a year ago, and there's something in that video that the algorithm picks up and starts promoting it to people. Now, I'll give you an example. I made a video with Twin Var from the Best Ever Food Review Show. She was a guest host on the Best Ever Food Review Show, which you might know, it's one of the biggest channels on YouTube with Sunny, and she's an amazing co-host on that as well. Now, we did an episode, it was doing okay, didn't do great. My YouTube channel isn't massive. Then, months later, I wasn't even thinking about it, I checked it, and suddenly I had all these downloads, all these views, I guess, because it's YouTube. I had all these new subscribers, and I can only guess what had happened was, and you could see the analytics where I wasn't a guess, I looked into the analytics and you could see where it had come from, that it was at the end of Best Ever Food Review Show videos. It was coming up, watch next, or do you want to watch this content? I can't remember exactly what it says. And it was showing my video. Now, it doesn't do it still, but it was obviously doing it for a short time. It picked up my video as what to watch next. So I was getting all these viewers coming from the Best Ever Food Review Show to my channel because I had Twin Var on there and it was being recommended. So you can see how much that videos can grow a new life months after you've posted them. And that's one of the beauties I love about YouTube is even though the algorithm has its downfalls, your video can do well way later on in the future. I've had conversations with podcasters before. It was actually about an episode that I was on. And I said, how are the downloads doing? And they went, not too great. And this podcast wasn't massive. So it wasn't like I was annoyed or surprised. It was fine. He said, it's going to pick up next week. I didn't want to bust his bubble. When you publish a podcast, in my experience, and if you have different experience, then please share it with me. But in my experience, it's not going to pick up. You get the biggest amount of downloads in the 24 hours after posting within the first 7 days, and then it trails off. It's never going to pick up again. And I've never had a podcast episode go viral or months down the line suddenly get all these downloads. It only happens in the beginning. Now, number 3, again, we talked about it with podcasting, but one of the best things about being a YouTuber is the monetization opportunities. Obviously, once you become eligible for monetization, you become eligible to put those annoying ads at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And who knows, maybe on this episode, maybe by the time you see this, I've hit the threshold and you're watching this and an ad has come up right now to annoy you. I'm so sorry, but it's the only way to make money. Now, I'm not monetized yet, but one day, maybe, and then you're going to see those ads and then I'll get paid for making this content. Because right now, I'm sitting here in my living room, not getting paid a thing. You obviously can also do it through sponsorships, through merchandise. You can set up Patreons, just as you can for audio podcasts as well. And one of the biggest things I love about YouTube is once you become eligible, you can actually set up memberships on the channel, which is very similar to a Patreon channel anyway, but you are keeping it all in the one ecosystem. And so even though Google owns YouTube, one of the biggest companies in the world, they've done a great job of creating an ecosystem where you don't need people who follow you on YouTube to go to other platforms to find you, like on Facebook or on Patreon, things like that. But obviously being a YouTuber has its downsides as well. And one of the biggest things that stopped me getting into YouTube in the beginning were the higher production costs. Now, I'm actually filming on my iPhone 14, so it is in 4K. And the camera on an iPhone is really, really good. But if you really do want to take YouTube to the next level, and as I said, I started ugly. I'm gonna get to the next level eventually. If you want to get to the next level, you're probably going to want like a DSLR camera. You want to make sure it's in 4K. I even heard that there's 8K as well when I talked to Gary Kelly, so go back and find that episode as well. It's going to take longer for my editor to edit this. I had to buy a green screen as well. There are just much more higher production costs involved in making a podcast for YouTube. So just be aware of that as well, which then also ties into the fact that it is just much more time consuming as well. It took me 20-30 minutes just to set this up before I got started. It took me another 10-15 minutes to make sure the camera was right as well, get the microphone in the right place. And there's obviously construction above me right now, which may be ruining this video completely, but we're going to see. But it is much more time consuming, I can guarantee. And last one, there is way much more pressure to perform. It's stressful to be on camera. I record podcasts now for a living, as you probably know. And I go to one of my clients' offices and I set up my camera, I set up the lighting. They're going to talk about finance, something that they know so well. They could talk about it in their sleep. And as soon as I press record on the microphones and the cameras, they go to pieces and they can barely get through a sentence. If you go watch that episode, which I'm not going to tell you which one it is, it looked amazing, and that is the magic of editing, and that is what we do. But there is a huge amount of pressure to perform on camera, so just be aware of that. And even this episode, you hopefully won't notice, but there's a couple of times I've made mistakes and stuttered through because it is hugely stressful to perform on camera. So how do you choose between podcasting and YouTubing? It really boils down to your strengths and your interests and your goals. If you enjoy in-depth conversations and storytelling without the need for visual elements, podcasting is probably going to be your best bet. And when I say podcasting, I mean audio only. But if you love creating visual content and you enjoy the dynamic interaction with your audience, you don't mind being on camera, you don't mind people looking at you, then YouTube could be the way to go. Just remember, you don't necessarily have to choose one over the other. There's many successful creators who use both platforms to complement each other. And my best advice to anyone I work with is create a YouTube channel, create a YouTube video, then we'll take the audio, put it on Apple Podcast and Spotify, and then we'll create the short form content as well. Remember, you don't have to choose one over the other. My recommendation is create a YouTube channel, take the audio, make a podcast, and then make short form content from the YouTube channel as well. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Smarter Podcasting. I hope you got a lot of great value out of it. Remember, send me a message, leave me a comment, get in touch. I love to hear from you. Remember, rate, review, subscribe, and most of all, turn on the notifications so you never miss a future episode. Thanks very much. I'm Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. Cheers.
Hi, my name is Sal Jeffries. I run the Mindset, Mood and Movement podcasts. I've been working with Neil at 7 Million Bikes for the whole of this year, literally from the start of my podcast to date. And I want to say a couple of things. So when we record the podcast, sometimes there are things that I need tweaking. There could be edits or clips. It's really simple. I give those instructions to Neil, he gets it sorted. There's sometimes a sound level differences between the guest mic and mine. Again, that's all sorted so the outcome is a really balanced sound. And also if there are issues with voice, little kind of sound interruptions, all those things that can distract a listener, Neil knows exactly what to do, cleans it up. The end result, a highly professional, beautiful sounding podcast without distraction. That's exactly what I want. I know my listeners do. So if you're interested in having that level of podcast and that kind of quality, Neil is a great guy and I highly recommend you speak to him.